The Korean War, a conflict that raged from 1950 to 1953, was a defining moment of the Cold War. It was a brutal and intense struggle that saw millions of lives lost and countless others forever changed. The war was not just a battle between two nations, but a proxy war that involved major global powers and ideologies. It was a war that would shape the geopolitical landscape for decades to come. It began on June 25, 1950, when North Korea, under the communist leadership of Kim Il-sung, launched a surprise invasion of its southern neighbor, South Korea. This sudden and aggressive move caught the world off guard and set off a chain of events that would draw in nations from around the globe. The invasion was meticulously planned and executed, with North Korean forces quickly advancing deep into South Korean territory. The peninsula had been divided along the 38th parallel since the end of World War II, with the Soviet Union backing the North and the United States supporting the South. This division was meant to be temporary, but as the Cold War tensions escalated, it became a permanent and heavily fortified boundary. The ideological divide between the communist North and the democratic South was stark, and it was only a matter of time before this tension erupted into open conflict. This division, a microcosm of the broader ideological struggle between communism and democracy, set the stage for a devastating conflict. The Korean War was not just a local skirmish, it was a battleground for the competing ideologies of the time. The North, with its communist allies, sought to spread its influence, while the South, supported by the United States and other Western nations, aimed to resist and contain this spread. Tensions had been simmering for years between the two Koreas, each claiming to be the legitimate government of the entire peninsula. These claims were not just political rhetoric, they were backed by military posturing and frequent border skirmishes. Both sides engaged in propaganda campaigns to win the hearts and minds of the Korean people, further deepening the divide. The situation was a powder keg, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Border clashes and skirmishes were common, but the scale of the North Korean invasion in 1950 shocked the world. The sheer audacity and scale of the attack demonstrated North Korea's determination to unify the peninsula under its rule. The international community, particularly the United States and its allies, were quick to respond, recognizing the invasion as a significant threat to global stability. Kim Il-sung, with the backing of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, aimed to unify Korea under communist rule. This support from the Soviet Union was crucial, providing North Korea with the military and logistical backing needed for such an ambitious campaign. The involvement of the Soviet Union also highlighted the broader Cold War context of the conflict, as both superpowers sought to expand their influence in strategic regions around the world. The invasion was a direct challenge to the United States and its allies, and it triggered a swift and decisive international response. The United Nations, led by the United States, quickly condemned the invasion and called for member nations to assist South Korea. This marked one of the first major tests of the United Nations' ability to respond to international aggression, and it set a precedent for future conflicts. The Korean War was the first major armed conflict of the Cold War, and it marked a turning point in the global balance of power. It was a brutal and costly war, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The conflict also saw the first large-scale use of jet aircraft in combat, as well as significant advancements in military technology and tactics. The war's outcome would have lasting implications for the Cold War and the future of international relations. It demonstrated the willingness of the United States to use military force to contain the spread of communism, and it led to a massive military buildup in both the East and West. The Korean War also solidified the United States' commitment to its allies in Asia, leading to the formation of military alliances and the stationing of American troops in the region. This military presence would play a crucial role in the subsequent conflicts and power dynamics in Asia. The war also had a profound impact on Korea itself, dividing the peninsula and leaving a legacy of mistrust and division that continues to this day. The Korean Demilitarized Zone, DMZ, remains one of the most heavily fortified borders in the world, a stark reminder of the conflict that once raged there. The war's legacy is also evident in the political and social dynamics of both North and South Korea, shaping their paths and relations with the rest of the world. The North Korean People's Army, equipped with Soviet tanks and artillery, stormed across the 38th parallel in a surprise attack. This bold move was meticulously planned and executed with precision, catching the South Korean forces completely off guard. The North Korean military, bolstered by Soviet support, had been preparing for this moment for months, if not years. Their strategy was to strike hard and fast, aiming to overwhelm the South before any significant international intervention could be organized. The South Korean army, caught off guard and ill-prepared for a full-scale invasion, was quickly overrun. The soldiers, many of whom were young and inexperienced, found themselves facing a well-trained and heavily armed adversary. The chaos and confusion that ensued were palpable, as South Korean forces scrambled to mount a defense. The lack of adequate training and equipment only exacerbated the situation, leading to a rapid and disorganized retreat. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, fell to the communists within days. The fall of Seoul was a significant psychological blow to the South Korean people and their allies. The city, a symbol of South Korean sovereignty and resilience, was now under the control of the North. The swift capture of Seoul demonstrated the effectiveness of the North Korean military strategy and highlighted the dire situation faced by the South. The speed and ferocity of the North Korean advance stunned the world and raised fears that the entire Korean peninsula would soon fall under communist control. International observers were shocked by the rapid progression of the North Korean forces. Civilians fled in droves, creating a humanitarian crisis that added to the urgency of the situation. Newspapers around the globe reported on the unfolding events, capturing the attention and concern of the international community. The United States, determined to prevent the spread of communism, responded swiftly to the North Korean invasion. President Harry S. Truman, recognizing the broader implications of the conflict, addressed the nation and the world, emphasizing the need to support South Korea. The American military began mobilizing, preparing to send troops and resources to the Korean peninsula. This was not just a regional conflict, it was a critical front in the global struggle between democracy and communism. President Harry S. Truman, with the support of the United Nations Security Council, committed American troops to the conflict. The decision was not made lightly, as it marked a significant escalation in the United States' involvement in global affairs. The UN Security Council, in a rare show of unity, passed resolutions condemning the North Korean aggression and authorizing the use of force to repel the invasion. American soldiers, many of whom had never been to Asia, boarded ships bound for a distant and unfamiliar land. The United Nations Security Council, in a rare show of unity with the Soviet Union absent, condemned the invasion and authorized the creation of a UN force to repel the North Korean aggression. This marked a pivotal moment in international relations, as countries from around the world came together to support South Korea. The formation of a UN force was a testament to the collective resolve to uphold international law and order. It also underscored the global stakes of the Korean conflict, as nations recognized the potential for a broader confrontation between East and West. This marked the beginning of the first hot war of the Cold War, with the United States and its allies fighting directly against communist forces. The Korean War was a stark reminder of the ideological divide that defined the post-World War II era. It was a conflict that pitted democracy against communism, freedom against oppression. The battles were intense and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The war also served as a testing ground for new military strategies and technologies, setting the stage for future conflicts in the Cold War era. The early days of the war were marked by a series of North Korean victories. The KPA, leveraging their initial momentum, continued to push southward, capturing key territories and inflicting significant losses on the South Korean and UN forces. These victories bolstered the morale of the North Korean troops and their leadership, who believed that complete victory was within their grasp. The relentless advance of the KPA created a sense of urgency among the UN forces, who realized that they needed to regroup and mount a more effective defense. The KPA, well-trained and well-equipped, pushed the South Korean and UN forces back steadily. The North Korean soldiers, driven by a combination of ideological fervor and military discipline, executed their operations with precision. The South Korean and UN forces, despite their best efforts, found themselves on the defensive, retreating in the face of the relentless North Korean advance. The front lines shifted constantly, with fierce battles being fought over strategic locations. The fighting was fierce and brutal, with heavy casualties on both sides. The Korean landscape, with its rugged terrain and harsh weather conditions, added to the challenges faced by the combatants. Soldiers endured grueling conditions, often fighting in close quarters and facing the constant threat of ambushes and artillery strikes. The human cost of the conflict was immense, with countless lives lost and many more wounded. The brutality of the war left deep scars on the Korean people and their land. The United States, though caught off guard by the invasion, quickly poured troops and resources into Korea, determined to halt the communist advance. The American military buildup was swift and substantial, with reinforcements arriving in waves. The commitment of the United States to the defense of South Korea was unwavering, as it sought to turn the tide of the conflict. The arrival of American troops brought a renewed sense of hope to the beleaguered South Korean forces, who were now bolstered by the might of the U.S. military. The stage was set for a protracted and grueling conflict, one that would test the resolve and endurance of all involved. The United States, under the banner of the United Nations, spearheaded the international effort to assist South Korea. This was a critical moment in the early days of the Cold War, as the world watched to see how the newly formed United Nations would respond to such a blatant act of aggression. The stakes were incredibly high, and the international community knew that failure to act could embolden other nations to pursue similar acts of expansionism. Military forces from numerous countries, including the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Turkey, joined the fight. These nations, despite their own post-World War II recoveries, recognized the importance of collective security and the need to stand against aggression. Their contributions, though varied in size and scope, were vital to the overall effort. Each country brought unique strengths and capabilities, creating a diverse and multifaceted coalition. The arrival of UN troops, along with a massive influx of American military equipment, helped to stem the North Korean advance. The logistical effort to transport troops and supplies across the Pacific was monumental, involving countless ships, planes, and personnel. This rapid mobilization demonstrated the industrial and military might of the United States and its allies, sending a clear message to North Korea and its supporters. General Douglas MacArthur, the famed American general who had overseen the Allied occupation of Japan after World War II, was appointed commander of the UN forces. MacArthur was a larger-than-life figure, known for his charisma and his ability to inspire troops. His leadership was seen as crucial to the success of the mission, and his appointment was met with both hope and skepticism. MacArthur, known for his bold and often unconventional strategies, devised a daring plan to turn the tide of the war. He believed that a direct assault on the North Korean forces would be too costly and time-consuming. Instead, he proposed an amphibious landing at a location that would catch the enemy off guard and disrupt their supply lines. This plan, while risky, had the potential to change the course of the conflict dramatically. He ordered an amphibious landing at Inchon, a strategic port city well behind enemy lines. The choice of Inchon was audacious. The port was heavily fortified, and the tides were notoriously difficult to navigate. However, MacArthur was confident that the element of surprise would outweigh these challenges. The operation required meticulous planning and coordination, involving naval, air, and ground forces working in unison. The Inchon landing, a risky gamble that paid off brilliantly, cut the North Korean supply lines and forced the KPA to retreat in disarray. The success of this operation was a turning point in the war, demonstrating the effectiveness of combined arms operations and the importance of strategic innovation. The North Korean forces, caught off guard and unable to resupply, were forced to abandon their positions and fall back. With the tide of the war turning in their favor, UN forces pushed north, liberating Seoul and driving the North Koreans back across the 38th parallel. The liberation of Seoul was a significant morale boost for the South Korean people and the international community. It symbolized the resilience and determination of the UN forces and their commitment to restoring peace and stability to the region. The success of the Inchon landing and the subsequent UN offensive raised hopes for a swift end to the conflict. There was a sense of optimism that the war could be concluded quickly, allowing for the reconstruction and healing of the Korean peninsula. However, this optimism was tempered by the realization that the conflict was far from over, and significant challenges remained. However, the entry of China into the war would soon dash those hopes and transform the Korean War into a protracted and bloody stalemate. The intervention of Chinese forces added a new and formidable dimension to the conflict, leading to intense and brutal fighting. The war, which had seemed on the verge of resolution, now stretched on, with no clear end in sight. The Korean peninsula would remain a flashpoint in the Cold War, a stark reminder of the complexities and dangers of international conflict.